Hi everybody, it's Bright here, and at last I'm going to talk about the encounter I had with the Teal'hia and the Tall Aliens from the Andromeda XI dwarf galaxy back in January 19th, 2011. Now, I've talked about that encounter before. That was actually the first encounter I shared. I talked about that at length. But as I said, there were large parts of that encounter that I skipped over. And one of the things that I touched on but I didn't talk about at the time was this experience of merging with the light. At the time, I think a year later, I posted a video. It took me that long to be comfortable to talk about that encounter. I talked about how those entities, the Teal'hia, the small beings who are 3.5 to 4 foot, some of them maybe even a little bit bigger, and the tall beings who are between 14 and 15 feet tall, who I call the Tall Aliens. I talked about how I had numerous different encounters with them as part of a bigger encounter, and that the sense was that time was changing, consciousness was changing, and there were times when I was very sick and emotional during that encounter, and other times when things were quite stable. And when I went back and revisited, I was able to unpack what actually happened. But at the time there were... See, when you talk about time, it all breaks down, but what appeared to be the time, there were other anomalous things happening that told me something else is going on here, and I'm not remembering what is actually happening, including at the end seeing the 3 craft moving off in formation. So this particular episode comes from the part at the end, and I think it's the part 4 of the January 19 encounter, where I'm on board the craft. It's, as far as I know, it's the craft of, or one of the craft of the Tall Aliens, and there are also the Teal'hia, the shorter aliens on board. They've come on board with me after creating these 2 different sound waves that seem to have affected my consciousness and my ability to remain with them without getting sick or passing out or getting highly emotional. I'm then taken on board the craft, and you'll recall the part where I see the Earth, and I'm very emotional about that experience. And then I think I touched on being taken through a doorway and seeing them and the process of them creating souls. Now, what I should say to you is I guess I simplified that, and it took me time to understand it as well. When I made that video a year after the event, I guess I understood what happened, but there have been successive layers, if you like, of layers to peel back to understand it better. And so I've done that. And at the time I wasn't really ready to talk about that, because in addition to everything else that took place, it was a very big encounter. It took me from one point of readiness and understanding in my experiences to a completely other place. And it just transformed everything overnight for me, literally. And I wasn't the same after that. And so I wasn't ready to disclose something else that took place for a number of different reasons. I guess one of the reasons was that what you're going to hear me talk about sounds very New Age, very, I suppose very stereotypical New Age, love and light kind of stuff. And I was concerned that if I spoke about that I would readily be dismissed and discounted and cut down and criticised. And as it was, just by coming out and beginning to start talk about my encounters through YouTube, I received all of that. And I've talked before about the hate mail and the venomous messages and the death threats and having to move house and all that kind of stuff. So there was a real follow-on effect from disclosing that, and there's a lot more that I have considered disclosing that I haven't yet disclosed, and perhaps in time I will, I'm not sure. I'm only doing this really because I feel people need to hear another point of view. They need to understand this phenomenon from a much wider point of view and not get stuck in these little ruts that, take us to aliens as demons and aliens as this and aliens as that, and us being controlled by the powers that be and controlled by the aliens, and all of this stuff that Marshall Summers and the like talk about, the allies of humanity and the good aliens and the bad aliens and all that kind of stuff. I'm very conscious of being hated because I won't toe the line and I won't go into that, and because I speak about the aliens in a benevolent way. And I'd like to say that, I'm not just a New Age sucker. I'm not an idiot in that way. I went through a developmental process from having great fear early on and feeling like a piece of meat to welcoming the experiences and actually feeling like I was coming home. So it was a very painful, difficult, long process that has taken much of my life from the first point where I was conscious when I was about, I think 1991 it was, in my early 20s, when I first became consciously aware that this had been happening since I was very little. At that point, it was a very turbulent thing to deal with, and I didn't have many reference points, Jacques Vallée and Whitley Strieber. And it was only later when my then partner and I were having joint experiences that things started to make a lot more sense. So it's been a very turbulent experience, and it didn't come with, this wonderful gift where I thought, it's all love and light and easygoing and such kind aliens. I had a lot of fear to work through. And I went through that, and it utterly transformed me. And the experience of having cancer, which I'm still dealing with, has also been part and parcel of that transformation. So my intention for sharing was to present another point of view where people could consider a wider perspective of who we are and who they are. And I held back on talking about this because of the criticism I sense was coming. Excuse me, I've got 3 cats in here with me who are not allowed back in the other room. They're in Coventry at the moment, so they may get a little annoying at times trying to get my attention. But I also sense that people would try to compartmentalize me as a particular type of person and see everything that I wanted to say in that regard. That would become the filter. And I knew that from experience that there are a lot of religious people who would say things like, I've come under the influence of Satan and all this kind of crap. And I first became aware of this when I read Standeo's Cosmic Conspiracy, I think maybe 89 or something like that. Aliens are not demons. Look above, we live in a very big universe. Just look at the night sky. We're going to interact with other species that are out there at some point, and that's what's happening. That's just narrow-minded, fearful conditioning. And so what I'm trying to do is present an alternative to that. And also a lot of the conspiracy theories also support these narrow-minded, conditioned, fearful ideas. And I'm trying to say, get past that. Embrace your own true nature to understand this. And that's one of the reasons I've started talking about the creator races, so we could see a much broader cosmic picture. And in time I hope to talk about how consciousness creates reality, and it's not just a matter of physically out there universe, it's a matter of how all of this is a product of consciousness. I guess there were probably 2 or 3 other reasons that I held back. I really felt that this was immensely personal, and it was the whole thing was an experience that happened to me for my benefit. And at no point during my experiences was I told, go out there and, be a mouthpiece for this, or, spread the word and spread the message. I don't have a message. I haven't been given a message to spread. I'm doing this because I think it's important. I'm doing this at great personal risk to myself and those I love, because I feel that it's important for honest, authentic people to come out and talk about what these experiences are really like from a point of view, and this may sound egotistic, so I don't mean it this way, but from a point of view of having developed spiritually, rather than living in a place of fear where you see yourself and the other. And I've been through that journey, so I think I can now speak from a point of view that embraces a kind of spiritual wisdom. And I don't sense that with some contactees and some experiences, and certainly not with the abductee crowd, especially those that feel victims. So there are a lot of reasons why I was reluctant to talk about this. And what I would like to say is this was the most significant event of my life, and the most significant event in any of my encounters. And these encounters continue every few months, sometimes at random, and sometimes I know they're coming, and there are other aspects to them that happen on a much more frequent basis. And I don't share everything. I reserve some things for myself because I suppose as human beings we all like to have something that's our own. So I guess what I'm also doing is I'm giving you something in telling you this experiences that in telling you this particular experience that's all my own. This is something that's dear to me. This is something that means a great deal to me. And I don't have to do this. Nothing compels me to do this, except I feel it's important to do something for the greater good. And so I'm doing this so that hopefully over the course of time, whether that's a day or 10 years or 100 years or 500 years, whatever it is, that what I have to share is understood by enough people that certain people choose to shift their perception of reality and their perception of who they are and we are and what the cosmos is, and embrace a much wider perception of reality. And I think ultimately that's good for us. Ultimately that helps the collective consciousness to shift and to grow and to mature. And if I can play a small role in that, then I feel like I've done something really good and really worthwhile with my life. So for me, I'm giving up what personally is a precious jewel, something that I carry in my heart, so that I can open other people's hearts. And I don't have any egocentric attachment to this, just a sense that I was given this for my benefit, but I also have this feeling that I have an obligation to help others to be free of their suffering and to see past suffering and to embrace the reality of what God is. And I'm not a religious person. I was formerly a Catholic when I was younger and went to boarding school and threw all that out the window, detested it, hated it. Have since embraced Buddhism and Taoism, shamanism and non-duality, and particularly the teachings of Ramana Maharshi and Dadaji. And so I've tried to be eclectic without being paranoid or overly attached to anything. I don't believe everything that Buddhism has to teach, and I certainly don't believe the idea of perpetual reincarnation, but Buddhism provides a good foundation for understanding reality and understanding how to live. But I think there are some aspects of Neo-Advaita, non-duality, that are equally important. And when I add the ET experiences, I feel like I probably have a fairly eclectic understanding of reality and God, and so hopefully I don't come across as overly religious, but I don't want you to think at the same time that just because I'm having these very physical and unusual experiences that I'm going to dismiss ideas like God and ETs and other things. Yeah. Anyway, perhaps I better get on with it. I've talked a little bit about that. I should just say we've had fires over the last month and an extremely long heat wave. It lasted close to a month. We evacuated 3 times. Fires came within 2 kilometres of here. And it really felt like a miracle that we're still here and that the wind changed and that things were safe. And I think I've mentioned in some of my earlier videos, I had some very strange experiences around it, including seeing beings of light and balls of light on a mountain the night before we evacuated, and having prayed to certain things that it would be safe. So for me, there's this ongoing proof that we're part of a much bigger reality. And I guess, why do I mention this? Well, right now it's raining, and today is the first day it's rained in 3 months. It's 2/3 of the way through summer, more than 2/3. It's almost over, and it's just wonderful to hear that rain. So you might hear the rain around us, and you might hear my cats on their scratching post or getting up to some mischief over there. So hopefully I won't have to depart, and just keep an eye on them. I can stay tracked with this. What I want to do is, in telling you this, and hopefully I've been able to get this up in one video, in telling you this, as with some of the other occasions when I've tried to relay the experience, sometimes the emotion comes back, and sometimes it comes back unexpectedly and very overpowering. And so whenever I talk about an experience in some detail, I go back over the recordings that I did, the notes that I took about the experience, and the regression, and I take notes, and I guess I try to refresh myself, because there's always little bits of detail you forget, and especially when you've had a lot of experiences, there's detail of things that were said that's easy to forget. You know, I remember the outline of the experience, but unless I go back and I go into a period of deep relaxation and take myself back into the experience, which is when I will remember all the details. Unless I do that, I just remember an overview of the experience, and certain parts that come back readily. Some parts sort of slip out of my ordinary day-to-day awareness. So it's good for me to take notes and to just be aware of that. Now, what I'd like to do is to try and just tell you from what I remember. But this is one of those occasions where there was a lot that took place. So what I'm going to try and do, and I don't know if this is going to work, I know I've tried to do this before and I felt uncomfortable doing it. I'm going to try and tell you what took place, and then occasionally I'm going to try and read verbatim from the things that were said, because I think that will convey things to you a little better. There are going to be some parts of this and I'm going to skip over, because I want to essentially give you the nuts and bolts of what happened, and I think by the end you'll understand what the experience was about. So I hope that all of this is in this first video. I won't know until I get to the end and see how long it is. I don't think this will take me more than 30 or 40 minutes to move through. And what I might do in a couple of days is make a second video, and in that video I will reflect on the experience and talk about what I think it means, because I don't think I should be doing that now. I think I should just try and convey to you what happened. And what I'll be trying to do is stay anchored and grounded without recalling the experience in the same way that I would when I'm trying to recollect what took place, because then I'll become really emotional, and it's very hard to make a video when you're highly emotional, as you've probably seen from some of my earlier videos. So let's see how it goes. So I'm back on the craft. It's January 19th, 2011. I think it's sometime around 10:15, 10:30. I don't recall the time. I'm on this very large craft, which is the craft of the Tall Aliens. At some later date I'll reveal their name, but suffice to tell you now that they come from one of the dwarf Andromeda galaxies, Andromeda 11. At least that's what we refer to it as. They've referred to it as other things as well. And so these two groups of beings have a very long historical relationship. They often work in communities on their craft. They work together. Hey guys. And there are often other entities from other races with them as well. So they don't work alone, they often work together. They understand one another very, very well. They can, I can't say this literally, but it seems as if they can finish one another's sentences. They're on the same level of development, have the same understanding. Both of them have sentient craft that are grown from the beginning. They're living entities. They are nurtured around these beings. Their consciousness is nurtured with these beings. So I'm on board one of these craft. It's a craft that responds to the needs of any individual. So for example, earlier I described the small ones taking a seat, and the seats came out to fit them, and then when they got up, the seat merged back into the craft. So I had been at the window at the front portion. I can't say that it's the front of the craft, because there was a much bigger part of the craft on the other side and I didn't see the complete craft. But it appears to me to be the front of the craft. I walk back, without referring to my old notes, I'm not sure how far it was, maybe about 30 meters. And I walk behind the seats where several of the entities have been. On the left there is one of the large, the Tall Aliens as I call them, at a console. And a few meters in front there is this thing that I've described as a doorway. Now it's probably more accurate to say that it's a frame rather than a doorway. It comes up from the ground and it goes up almost to the roof. Now the Tall Aliens are, as I said, about 14 to 15 foot from what I measured in my garage when I saw them back in 2009 or 10, whatever that date was. And it's taller than them, and the roof is taller than them, so this is quite a big structure. It is probably maybe 5 meters wide. I'm not sure if I had that in my older notes. And it is curved, but it's like 3 parts to the curve on the side. A side, sort of slightly straighter curve, and then a curve. and it's kind of like a round, spherical metal, I guess. Most of the craft has this shiny, light grey, at times it appears motley surface that is actually soft. Not soft as in you can compress it, but it doesn't feel hard. And this appears to be the same. You know, I assume it's come out of the floor because the craft creates what is required, and it knows because it interfaces with the consciousness of the beings on the craft, and also because it interfaces to different levels with the visitors that come on the craft, so it can know their preferences as well. It depends on what it's allowed to know. So it's obviously created this structure. So there's this structure of this frame on either side, and it doesn't go completely to the roof. I couldn't really tell you how far under the roof, maybe a foot under the roof, but it's very large. It's large enough to accommodate the tall aliens. And it appears at this distance to have this light field, and it's a whitish, yellowish light. It kind of appears soft. What I noticed later when I'm coming out is sometimes when you see lights, or if you see a light field in some kind of sci-fi movie, it always appears to have that static, harsh, static appearance to it. Well, this isn't like that. This is very soft, almost fluffy, pillowy, soft. It's just a very soft-looking texture. And this field is from one side of the structure to the other. And I have with me 3 of the beings. There is one of the tall entities, one of the females who had been up with me at the front, and she's on my right hand side. And there are 2 of the Teal'hia on the left. One is female, the one closest to me, and the other one is male. Now these are 2 who interact with me quite often, and they had been guiding me through much of this fuller encounter. And they explained to me well, maybe it's better that I read from my notes now and tell you verbatim what they said. They said to me, "We will take you to where God exists to see what God is doing. We will take you beyond this world to understand the creation of this world." And they asked me, do I wish to see, do I wish to experience God's presence? And at this point, I'm quite happy to, but I am anxious. You know, I'd already gotten a bit upset because I'm thinking that I wouldn't ever go home, and I'm seeing the earth and then I'm seeing space afterwards, and I was very uncomfortable. Guys, I'll come down. So I'm very uncomfortable, and I don't really know what's going to happen to me when I go through the light. I have this degree of anxiety because this is totally new. And they reassure me no harm will come to me, I won't die, I'll be coming back, we won't be away too soon, but that I would enjoy this experience. Damn cats. You know, if I had a dog, I could just tell him to sit down and he'd be loyal, but my cats just get into these moods this time of the night where they run around like idiots. So I feel, you know, I've always trusted them, and, well, as I grew into the experiences and grew past the fear, I certainly have since then trusted them. Hello, Mishka. And I do trust them. I accept their reassurances. And so this is what they said to me: "We wish to introduce you to this greater reality so you might know where you came from and why it is we have created you. Do you wish to go?" So they're just easing me into the experience. They're not forcing me to do anything. Oh, this is one of the noisy ones. They're not forcing me to do anything. They are giving me the choice as to whether I want this experience or whether I don't want this experience. And I'm quite willing to have this experience, but I want to know that I'm coming back intact. So at various different times they reassure me. And before I got to the frame, before I got through, don't eat my notes, I needed a lot of that reassurance. Once I was through the frame, then less of that reassurance was required. So I've said yes, and then what happens is the tall alien takes my right hand, and the two Teal'hia, first the female takes my left hand, and then the male takes her hand. And so we're walking, the four of us, towards this light. Oh, I've got cat fur, it's driving me nuts. I don't know if you can see that cat fur floating up, but she's a very fluffy cat who loses lots of fur. And I'm probably allergic to cats, but I put up with them. So I'm walking towards the light, and they just asked me just walk into the light, and I walk into the light. And as soon as I do that, there is this sense that I'm walking on something, but I can't see anything concrete that I'm walking on, but there's a sense that I'm walking on a surface. And it's as if I've gone somewhere completely different. I'm no longer on the craft. And I feel like I'm on another world. I feel as if I am in somewhere completely and utterly alien to this craft. And we walk a little, and they're still supporting me, trying to encourage me to let the fear pass. And very soon they say to me, look around you, Bright. Can you feel the light? And the minute I'd entered the light, the light became more luminous than being on the outside. And I guess it's hard to put colour to this. It's, I think perception and language breaks down, and so it's very difficult for me to explain this entire experience to you. But I guess you'd say it was a yellowy, whitish kind of luminous light. And at this point, as soon as they say that, I feel this emotion, and I'm utterly overwhelmed. And I say, I feel the light. I feel so loved. And I do, I just feel completely and utterly loved, unconditionally loved, as I've never felt before. And it floors me. I'm powerless, and I have no response to it. And the fear dissipates and is replaced by an intense love for the being that I'm feeling, and a longing to stay here. And then the tall being says to me, this is the being who created you. This is what we are. We are the beings who created you because we love you. We want you to live and know love. We are here to awaken you to that love, Bright. Despite all that you have suffered in your life, we want you to know that you are loved. We are the God that you see in the light, that you feel in the light. It is the same God that is inside of you. He is here with love inside of you. Do you understand, Bright? Do you feel it? And I know that's the truth. I feel it. I know it. And I have this sense that the individual that I am is dissolving. It's like something is being released inside of me that has always been there, but I haven't allowed it to come through. And this individual that's holding this form isn't necessary. Not that it's not necessary, but this sense that it's just a part of who I am. And then they let my hands go, and I'm floating, and there's nothing, it's not like I'm floating above the trees or above the ground. I'm just floating. I no longer feel that surface. And the minute that I begin floating, my body disappears. But it's funny because I saw my feet, and then my feet disappeared. It was like I needed some recognition that I was still there, other than just the feeling that I was still there. And then everything is gone, and they're gone completely, and I'm in the light. And then I hear one of them say to me, "Do you hear us, Bright? Do you sense us? Do you feel us? We are still here, inside of you and beside you. You are now at one with God. Do you feel God within you? You are within God, and He is within you. Look, Bright, we wish you to see what God is doing." And it's not like they say this all at once. There are breaks, and then there's a very long break at this point, because I'm overwhelmed with the feeling. And I say I am overwhelmed, but it's like that very small part of me is overwhelmed because the larger part is erupting. It's coming out, and the awareness is transforming. And they say to me, "This is our work." And at that point, I see this core of light. It's as if I'm seeing it in the distance. I don't know if I still have eyes. I mean, I don't have a body, but it's as if I'm seeing this core of light in the distance that is more radiant, more luminous, more pure. And there are these different forms, almost embryonic. They don't look like embryos we would recognize, but almost embryonic, really primordial forms, kind of like forms of light, I suppose. And they're coming out of the core of light, but it's not quite like they're coming out of the center, they're just forming. And then I notice it's happening all around me, not just in the core of light. And as I notice that it's happening everywhere, I realize that it's the same light. The core, this is the same light. The core of light is everywhere. It's as if I was seeing one thing and then realizing that I had isolated it, but it was everywhere. And the forms are coming out of it, and I say, "What is happening? What is it I'm seeing?" And I feel this sense of becoming something more that's already part of what I am, but it's coming out. But there's still the individual me that is limited and still has questions. And at that point, they say to me, you feel it, Bright. You know what this is. And I just feel. And as I'm feeling, it's like the transformation completes itself. And I know, and I say, yes, God is creating souls. This is your work. And they say to me, yes, Bright, we are creating souls. We are creating souls. They are called many things, but they are the essence that is God. Do you understand, Bright? Everything is God. God creates souls. We create souls. God brings consciousness to the entire universe. God is awake, and we are helping him to know life in all its forms. This is our work, to love what we create, to love all that God creates, to nurture, to create with love, to help all beings know they are one with God and cannot be separated even for a moment. Cat fur. And during this whole experience, as I said, there were 3 entities who went into the light with me. And when they disappeared, I could sense which of them was speaking to me, but it was also as if the light was speaking to me. And yet I knew what they were saying. It was as if I was speaking. And so what was being said would move between different ones at different times, but it would also feel like the light was speaking. So at this point, the one on the left says, no, Bright, you cannot be separate from God no matter how much you suffer. God is always there loving you. You must trust in God's love. Off you go, pussy. Take your fur. Sorry about the cat interruptions. Whatever you do, don't get a ragdoll cat. They weep fur everywhere and it drives you nuts. Apart from that, they're the best cats you can have. And so I'm receiving these words back, and I'm being told what I already know, but it's like there is still the small me, the individual me that needs that reassurance. And at this point, the male Teal'hia says to me, feel, Bright, feel God's love inside of you, creating you. Feel that you are God. This is what it means to be God incarnate. You exist within God and He in you. You are not separate, always whole. Feel His creation in you. Do not perceive yourself simply as a human being who God has forgotten. See all of this and know that you are within His creation and it is within you. Feel it now, do not speak. And at that point, I felt compelled to let go. To let go of that part of me that was asking questions, that was seeking. To let go of the seeker, to let go of the individual. And just feel. And that's what I did. I felt. And for a long time, I was just feeling. and there is this luminous light everywhere, and I'm feeling it. And it's like there are these different, throughout the course of this, it's like there are these different phases of letting go, different elements in the final transformation. And this is probably the last one. I know that I am the light. It's everywhere. The light is everywhere, and it is within me. I'm not just bright garlic, the individual. I'm everything that is the light. And I have no questions, no answers. I am just being in the light and being the light. And for what feels like the longest time, like time doesn't exist, I am everything. It's not even a question of knowing everything, because I am everything. Everything that had ever existed or ever will exist, whether in form or formlessness, I am. And there's no need for understanding it. It is just known. And it truly is a feeling of no, I'm sorry, I don't have words for that feeling. I don't have words to describe what that was like. At some point, and as I said, it felt timeless. At some point, one of them says to me, when you're ready, bright, we'll bring you back to your body. Just reach out to us. And after a while, I was kind of reluctant to do it. I was the light and I was everything, but I was also the small me, bright. But it was if I could embrace everything and then shift back, but still have the awareness of the everything. And I was able to, when they spoke to me, have that smaller perspective, and at a point I was ready. And suddenly I'm in my body and they're back, and the large one is holding my right hand, and the female Teal'hia is holding my left hand, and the male Teal'hia is holding her hand, and the male Teal'hia and the tall alien are holding each other's hands, and they're standing. Everybody's standing, holding hands in front of me, and we're still kind of floating, I guess you'd say. And the male says to me, remember this, Bright, for you will return here one day when you are ready to return home. Do not forget what you have experienced. Do not forget what you have. It is always there inside of you. It is there inside of you. It can never be lost. Do not be afraid, Bright, for this is your home. Everything in life you experience is passing. this is your home. And at that point, they're ready to take me back, and they ask me if I have any questions, and the sense is stronger again that I am my individual self, but I still feel the light. I just don't feel that I am the light, but I feel the light's presence. I just don't feel this complete and utter sense that I am the light. There's another shift that's taken place. And I asked them several questions at that point. It's as if the seeker came back, the individual self that didn't know everything. And I wasn't sure that I hadn't died, and they told me that, this is what they said: we removed you from your body was safe, beyond the realm of the body. I asked them, where did we go? Beyond the realm of the body, where the body cannot go. And so at this point, they're ready to take me back, and once again we start walking, and then I feel a surface again, and I see through this light field, and I can see the other side of the ship, the inside of the craft, the ship, where I had previously been. And as I walk through, they had told me that I would feel a sense of being, I'm not sure if this was the word, dislocated from my body, a different perception. And so I didn't have the normal sense I would have to investigate things, and that's very typical of me. I really notice detail. But I wasn't in that frame of mind, but I did look at the frame, the door, as we left, and this light field was just incredibly thin. And that was when I noticed that it had this very soft, pure texture about it, and wasn't like a rough kind of staticky sort of surface, like a projection of some sort. At that point, they took me back through, and they talked to me about some other things, and when I went back to the individual self, there was some confusion when I came back through, but also a deep sense of peace, greater than any I've ever experienced. And they encouraged me not to let the confusion overwhelm me, and to stay with the sense of peace. And I was very tired. I don't know if I was physically or emotionally tired, I just felt like I needed to sleep or to rest, just feel the body again in a very rested state. At that point, the tall alien said goodbye to me, and I said I'd be back soon. She told me to take as long as I needed to rest. And the other two, the other one, the male one, came around to my other hand, and they escorted me out of that room. And we went around through the corridor, and the corridor went the other side of the light field, and I looked back and could see the other side of it, but it was just a light field, there was nothing to see. And I could see that we were in another part of the ship, and we walked down the corridor. There's a very large ovoid area that opens up. There were many different beings in there, Teal'hia and Tall Aliens, in this very large part of the craft doing different things. And we walked through that, walked into a corridor that then opened up, and walked down left, and then there was a room on the right. We walked into the room, the door was open, it was a very tall room, And they took me in, and I'll leave it at that. Basically, they left me there to rest, and then later on I came back for some other things. There were other things they wanted to teach me. Yeah, I think that's probably all I need to say about the experience. What I would like to say is, after that experience, a couple of things started to happen which I didn't fully make sense of at the time. About that stage, I had a renewed interest in life after death. When I was about 19 or 20, I began to develop a really avid interest in the subject, and there wasn't a lot back in the late 80s that had been written about that subject. I had an interest, but it was very intense for a short period of time, maybe a week or two, and then I didn't take much notice of it. I didn't read a lot about that. I didn't really want to know. And then after this, I had this renewed sense of interest in life after death, as I said, and I began watching videos mostly and listening to audio content. Then last year I began really getting interested in it again. It sort of came in waves, and revisited some of Kenneth Ring's work, particularly his latest work, and seeking out the more unusual elements, trying to understand it. And what I was seeing was parallels with the experience I'd had. I guess if you had to label it, you would say it was a near-death-like experience with many of the same elements. And I hadn't at that point been aware that anybody else had had an experience like this who was a contactee or an experiencer. And then I discovered sometime last year Betty Andreasen's account from the early 60s of having been with small beings, bad-tempered thing, and being taken in through a doorway to meet God or merge with the light. Hey, what are you biting me for? She never bites. And you can just get down, bad-tempered thing. We've just got 2 new cats. We've had them for a couple of months, and she's got quite possessive. She was the spoilt princess and has now had to deal with that. So sorry about all the interruptions. I learned about Betty Andreasen's experience, and I was really keen to learn more about that, and I could only find a limited amount of that. I did actually try and contact her through Facebook and discuss and share and find out. While she's accepted a friend request, she hasn't got back to me, but I'd love to talk to her about it. And what I'm curious to know is if there are other people who've been through this, and maybe that's one of the other reasons that I'm posting this, because I want to find out if other people have been through this experience. So while you might argue, people who are quick to be critical, you might argue that I've been influenced by what I'd read previously. Well, I can't rule that out, but I had not read a lot in alienology, ufology, alien field when I was younger. Just a little bits, and nothing remotely like the experiences I was having. You can never rule out influences, but as far as I'm aware, I wasn't, regurgitating somebody else's stuff. But what struck me was the parallels with the near-death experience. I guess as I said, I would like to do another video as a follow-up to this, but what I would like to say is, for those of you who have gotten this far, I'm going to leave the comments up. I'm not sure that will stay that way, but watch for the religious fanatics who take offence at this and think it's the devil's work, or that I've been brainwashed or whatever, and watch for the kind of comments you see. I mean, for me, this was a deeply religious, transformative experience of really connecting with my true nature and with God and finding out what the ETs really are. More than ET, more than extraterrestrial, more than alien. Actually more like something we know. And has nothing to do with deception. You know, that's conditioning. And those of you who are those religious fanatics, you can't see your own conditioning. So I urge those of you who have gotten this far to look for the comments when they appear. And in time, there'll probably be more of them, but I may just stop comments. The other thing to take note of is the people who think that this is mind control. It's not. I've never had those experiences. As far as I'm aware, I'm as aware as I can be as a human being, and I've done a lot of work to get to that point. We're all victims of delusions. You know, the mind creates delusion, and I've tried to work very hard with that from a Buddhist point of view. As far as I'm concerned, there's no mind control. A lot of the so-called mind control is our own delusion. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because it does, but often people like to dismiss their more extreme alien experiences as mind control, and I'm trying to tell you this isn't that. I can't convince anybody, but this is my point of view. And there are other people who have a legitimate comment to make that this is a shamanic kind of experience, that this is a spiritual experience. In other words, it's an experience happening only to consciousness, only to the mind. It doesn't have a physical basis in reality. Well, I can't say anything to convince the people that believe that. All I can tell you is that these experiences have happened with two other people at once, with myself and with my former partner and with my son. And this particular experience had a lot of elements that were very physical, including seeing the craft. If you took everything out in terms of how my memory was affected, I still saw craft at the end flying in formation, and there were distortions in time. But if you're willing to accept what I say about going back into the experience and remembering other things, then I can tell you there was a lot of very physical things that took place that I don't believe are just archetypal manifestations and shadows remanifesting from the unconscious and all of this kind of thing. All of those things are true, and all of those things play out in this entire field, especially the idea of archetypes. And so we might say, here's a God archetype. But what I'm trying to say to you is we live in a very, very diverse universe. Look up there. You just see how many stars there are. There are beings who are out there interacting with us. This was one of those kinds of experiences. As with the other experiences, I have a very physical experience. But then it became something else. And there may also be people who respond to this who say, well, this is a little bit like Star Trek. You just walked onto a holodeck and it was all just programmed into the holodeck. Or maybe people that believe in the Matrix crap. You just walked into a matrix and it was all just a hologram that was created in your head and around you, and that's all it was. What I'd like to say is I'm the first one to say Michael Talbot's work on holographic universe, and the others who have taken up that torch and the others who preceded him. They have some great ideas, and it's a wonderful way to look at reality. But what we must remember, absolutely must remember, is it's a metaphor. It's not ultimate reality. It can't explain everything that takes place. And so maybe you could say that some of the experiences were movements in the greater hologram, if you like. But what I'm saying is that's a limiting metaphor. People want to use the word paradigm. So while there will be people who will readily jump on that bandwagon and dismiss it and say that I stepped into something like Star Trek, I'm saying to you, no, that wasn't the experience at all. These beings are able to alter consciousness and take it out of the body. So what I'll do in the next video is talk at length about what I think took place. Feel free to leave comments. I tend to find outlandish criticism irritating. You know, I'm at a point in my life healing from cancer where I don't need to put up with juvenile crap. I'm out giving this for free. You know, if you're a 20-year-old who does nothing all day but play on Xbox or, watching videos, or a 60-year-old that does the same thing, get a life. Don't bother leaving a comment. But to other people for whom this meant something, yeah, I appreciate your comments. At the end of the day, I'm not attached one way or another. If this fosters some dialogue, all well and good, because I think there are probably others who have experienced this, and I'd like to imagine that this entire subject will move in a completely different direction that starts considering the role of consciousness in the creation of reality, and starts asking the really hard questions like, what is consciousness? What is the soul? How do our ET friends move around with consciousness? How do they shape reality? And how do we interact with them with these abilities that they have? There's a whole other area of this subject of alienology waiting to be opened, and it hasn't yet been opened. So I leave this with the blessing that maybe somebody will get what I'm trying to say and start that ball rolling. So thank you very much for getting through an hour and 7 minutes and for listening to this. As I said, it wasn't easy for me to do, and it was a nuts and bolts. I skipped over a few things, but hopefully you can see why I put off talking about it. So thank you very much for watching. Rock on. Julius and Grumpy, as you can hear. I'm Bright Garlick, and this is Grumpy saying goodbye till next time. Hey Grumpy, look, it's you. Cowabunga. Bye.